Patrick Garofalo in Washington, from your vantage point in the United States, where the banks there went through their own series of stress tests before things started to affect banks in Europe. What can Europe perhaps learn from what the United States went through? And on the other side of that, what impact could the results of these tests have on the investment climate and the economic climate in the United States?
Well, I think what Europe has learned is to not make their stress tests quite as big a joke as the American ones were. When America did stress test banks here, they said up front that no banks were going to fail, and then even once the tests were completed, they kind of moved the goalposts as to what merited passing, what warranted passing, to give some of the biggest banks a break. The American stress tests were really about papering over problems in the American banking sector long enough that the banks had kind of earned their way out of their problems. And so it was successful in that sense, but in terms of actually learning anything about the health of American banks, the American stress tests were pretty useless. So I think Europe has learned in that sense that they need to look a little harder and be a little tougher. In terms of the results on the American economy and the American investing class, I think bad results would shake the investment in the stock market a little bit here, but really America is preoccupied with the debt ceiling crisis. All of the political oxygen in Washington, D.C. is kind of being sucked out of the room by the fight over raising America's debt ceiling, because if America defaults, that's our biggest problem, and that's what everyone is going to be focused on.
All right, now the basic argument that you heard there in Nadim's report, and if I could turn to you on this, Patrick Garofalo in Washington, is that these ratings agencies lack any real independence because, as they pointed out, they are funded by the very institutions that they are supposed to be rating. So there is a conflict of interest there, the critics say. So what can the Europe learn from that in terms of wanting them to, if they are to set up these European rating agencies, in terms of being able to make them more independent?
I think having more independent rating agencies is really key. I'm not sure on how you go about setting that up or how you make it credible, which I think is the most important question. But there's no question in my mind that the rating agencies obviously missed the housing bubble in the U.S. and are now just wreaking havoc on both the U.S. budget situation and in Europe. Standard & Poor's said that it's going to downgrade the U.S. credit rating even if the debt ceiling is raised, if the U.S. doesn't cut $4 trillion from its budget. That's nonsense. Why does a credit rating agency get to dictate policy to a country? I don't think that's the right thing for them to be doing. So finding some other model, as long as you can make it credible, I think would be a really good thing both in the U.S. and in Europe.
Patrick Garofalo, if I could turn back to you on this. I mean, especially with what's going on in the United States right now, the debate about the debt ceiling, is there a danger perhaps that they're maybe taking their eye off the ball here as far as what's happening in Europe?
I think there absolutely is. Like I said before, the debt ceiling debate, if you can even call it a debate at this point, is really sucking all of the oxygen out of the room in Washington, in the U.S. media, and so they're really not paying much attention to Europe or to wider systemic issues, and I think that is a big problem. The faster they resolve this debt ceiling issue here, and the faster they can turn to paying attention to other things, I think would be really beneficial.